time is finally here. We break down the UCF Knights offensive lineman and what Shawn Clark can bring to the room this upcoming season. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I am your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, Bet Online. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today and make game day action count a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. Like I said, it is finally here. We've been putting it off, not intentionally, but we've been putting off filming the offensive lineman episode just because stuff has popped up. The schedule got released. We decided to do some other things first. We decided to do the coaches first before we did the offensive lineman. And obviously now it's just me. You don't see Nick. Nick had stuff to do. So you get me talking about, I think it's 21 offensive linemen. Now, listen, let's be real here. I've done research on all these guys. I haven't watched a ton of tape on all of them. It is February. So this is going to be very generalized thought processes on all of them and kind of what the coaching staff may be thinking into all of these guys, from the true freshmen all the way up to 5th and 6th year guys. So I wanted to get started kind of quickly talking about Shawn Clark. And I think he's going to be really the headline of this episode, because we can go through all of the offensive linemen, and we're going to. But I think what's going to make this very interesting is what Shawn Clark can bring from a development standpoint. We've kind of talked about it. I think it was the best offensive hire in terms of coaching this cycle. I mean, you talk about Mackenzie Milton, that's nostalgic. I think he's going to bring a lot to the quarterback room. But when you talk about a guy that's proven to be a winner at the collegiate level as a head coach, a proven guy that has developed good offensive linemen, I think Shawn Clark can come in really early and get a lot of these guys developed. And like I said in the coaching episode, it's no diss on Herb Hand. I think Herb Hand, in terms of coaching on the Gus Malzahn staff, did a lot more with the offensive line than people give him credit for. The offensive line wasn't always great. There were times where they struggled, and you looked at it like they can't protect. But when you go back and look, I think there's a lot more positives than negatives with Herb Hand, and he was really starting to find a groove at recruiting. And we're going to go through some of the guys that they're recruiting now, and kind of we can compare to what Herb was recruiting at. But I think getting Shawn Clark into the building and getting him to develop a lot of young guys, we're going to talk about it, is going to be huge for this UCF Knights team, especially for a offensive line group that is getting younger by the year. They brought in a couple older guys, but as the years go on, it is dwindling and it is getting very, very young. All right, well, enough talk. Let's get started, because we've got a lot of guys to get to. So we're going to start with the freshmen. So like we're going to do this, we kind of did this the same with the receivers. We're going to kind of do it with a lot of these guys. We're going to do it freshmen and true freshmen, and redshirt freshmen and true freshmen. Then we're going to go to sophomores, redshirt sophomores, redshirt juniors, all that good stuff. We're going to group all of the junior, sophomore, freshmen, and seniors together to make this a little bit more easy to watch for you guys. I'm going to kind of give you, at the end, my starting five, if you will, on the offensive line. So let's get started. UCF did just add 3 new offensive linemen on National Signing Day in terms of freshmen. Now, this was kind of unexpected. Clearly, the staff, I did say they'd probably add a couple more players from the 2025 class in this cycle. And they've added 3. Jacob Maiava, a 6'2", 290-pound interior offensive lineman. He's from Hawaii, from the 808. So that pipeline is now back on track with Scott Frost at the helm. He's a 3-star flip from SMU. And I think out of these three, he's a guy that you can really get behind and like. SMU's been having a hard time this offseason, keeping guys away from UCF. Obviously, Chase and Johnson. That was a whole whirlwind of a story, but originally committed to SMU to go play for them and then came back to UCF. So that's now 2 players in the cycle that have committed to SMU and then have flipped back to UCF. But I think Jacob Mayava is a good pickup for Scott Frost and staff. It's a middle tier 3-star prospect, a guy that, again, you could develop. I'm sure Mackenzie Milton had some ties to Mayava, and that's a good pickup. Camp Lott, freshman, 6'6", offensive tackle, a flip from Air Force. If you go look at his offers, didn't have a lot of offers. I think he was going to play on the defensive line. UCF obviously is getting him to be an offensive tackle. They need to sign some offensive tackles. They did, and it's a solid pickup. He doesn't have stars on 247. It's kind of a theme with some of these guys. He's not really high in recruiting ranks. He's not sought after by many. But again, the staff is going after development, and you're developing these guys, and that's kind of what they're banking on with a guy like Camp Lott. Another guy, very similar, Rayshawn McCaney, 6'8", 250-pound offensive tackle. His best offer was Army. He doesn't have many offers. He's only got a couple, or I think it was 10 offers. I have to go back and look. Again, all these guys kind of mixed together, but his best offer compared to UCF was Army. So back-to-back guys who didn't really have a lot of offers from big-time schools, but is getting an opportunity at UCF. And in the Big 12, we've seen, especially on the offensive line, size is needed. If UCF the first couple years was really small on the offensive line, and when you go into these games and you'd see the difference between, I think the first time we really noticed it was Kansas State in that first game where we walked in and you said, well, those guys are big. So the 6'8", 4 or 5 stars, right now UCF has to prove it on the field. They're not going to be getting those type of guys. So you need to get guys that are maybe under-recruited and develop them. And that's why I think Shawn Clark is the star of this, because you're signing some guys that maybe don't have the stars, don't maybe have the praise, but maybe have a couple skills that you can work with and develop. So I think getting a guy like Rayshawn McCaney, getting a Camp Lott, getting a Jacob Mayava, even though Jacob Mayava is a little bit more recruited than those other two, is going to be huge to see if they can get developed over the next couple years. Let's talk about actual freshmen besides those that were just signed. Jacquez Joyner, who I think the next two guys I think are some really good mainstays for this 2025 class. Jacquez Joyner, 6'3", 260 interior offensive lineman from Cocoa. Obviously, UCF was going hard after Cocoa Tigers. That was a focal point for the Knights. And Jacquez Joyner stayed, didn't go off like Javon Boggs, stayed committed to UCF, and I think he's got a really bright future. He's a kid that's been committed to UCF for a while. He wants to be in Orlando, and I think when we talk about development, he's a guy that I think if he really takes a hardcore development year, he can get playing time early. Now when I go into the other guy, Drew Fuentes. This kid, 6'7" offensive tackle, already 275. Like, I think with some of these guys, especially some of the offensive tackles, they come in at a smaller weight, a weight that you know they're going to have to bulk up a little bit. Already at 275, and this kid was sought after. He had offers from Colorado, Michigan, Penn State, Indiana. He had offers from a lot of places. I think Drew Fuentes, and if you go on it, I don't think he has stars either, but he was highly sought after. I think, again, and I'm going to say development a lot in this episode because that is what this room needs, is development, and a coach that can develop these guys to kind of play above their weight over the next year or two. I think Drew Fuentes is a guy that, again, just like Jacquez Joyner, in a year could be somewhere in that rotation, could definitely be in the mix for a potential rotation spot if he can develop, because he's got the size. He needs to put on a little bit of weight, but not too much compared to, again, a guy like Rayshawn McCaney, who's 6'8", but 250. So I think that's where it kind of comes into play here, where a guy like Drew Fuentes could be a guy in the coming years ahead. Let's get to the redshirt freshman. Chase Malamala was on the team last year, 3-star offensive tackle in 2024, 300 pounds, and he had offers from Auburn and FSU. A lot of these guys, we're just going to need to see development. They're getting, obviously, a new offensive line coach. They were Herb Hand commits. I am intrigued to see a guy like Malamala and how much he's developed in this past year. I'm excited to talk to these guys when we get a chance to. And again, if they really developed from last year to this year, who knows what can happen? Do I think they're going to play? No. UCF, when we get to some of the guys coming up, UCF was really going after certain guys with a ton of experience, especially on that interior. So I think a guy like Chase Malamala might have another couple years until he's really looked at. But again, a good kid that was brought in by Herb Hand that can continue to be developed in the UCF system. Walt Claire Flynn, redshirt freshman, one of my favorites. I think the 4-star banner for him definitely helps. I think this kid has all the intangibles. He came in, it says he was 304. I want to know if he put on any weight or lost any weight. He's 6'2". He is a true center. I think you have to play him at center at the collegiate level. And listen, when I get to my final predictions, he might be in there. He might have made his way in there. We're going to go through all the guys and see. But I think just by the sheer talent coming out of high school, we only said he really just needs a year to learn the college game, sit and learn, and then sky's the limit for the kid. So I think Walt Claire Flynn, as a redshirt freshman, could see playing time this upcoming season. Thomas Garrity, redshirt freshman. I haven't been able to check. I think he might be a walk-on. Wasn't really ranked. Didn't have any stars. 6'4" interior offensive lineman from Osceola. He did have an offer from Duke, but that rounds out kind of the redshirt freshman/freshman bit of the offensive line portion. I'm going to be honest. We're at the sophomores, and I don't want to. I hate putting guys in a bubble and saying these guys aren't going to be anything, or these guys aren't going to really have an impact on the upcoming season. But I will say, I think this is why UCF especially went hard after a couple of, offensive linemen in that freshman class. If you look, UCF have signed 5 offensive linemen in this last class, and they had 3 from the previous one. I think a couple guys transferred out, maybe. I have to look. But that's 8 freshmen, either redshirt or true, that we just talked about. When you get to the sophomores, there's 3. Ethan Higgins, Andrew Phelan, and Matthew Prigmore. And look, I think anybody can play, especially on this team. We said it. Scott Frost is going to give everybody an opportunity to play. I don't see these guys taking a step to be able to play. I think it's kind of like that weird zone, and that's why I said the freshman class is so important, because when we go through the juniors and seniors, you're kind of going to get to see how they don't really have many years left. They're needing to start bringing guys to develop, and it seems like that sophomore class, there's kind of a void there where you don't really have guys in that sophomore class that are going to get a lot of opportunities to get playing time. So I think Ethan Higgins, Andrew Phelan, and Matthew Prigmore, we'll see what happens, but I think that sophomore class is kind of the area where UCF is really not looking great on the offensive line. But let's go to the juniors, because the juniors have some guys here, folks. Some of the guys they brought in are big time. And we'll start with probably the best offensive lineman that they brought in this cycle. Carter Miller, redshirt junior, played in 11 games last year at left guard at Louisiana Monroe. He was a 4-star in the portal. 247 rated him a 4-star in the transfer portal. He was originally going to go to Colorado. He has a picture online of him in his Colorado Buffalo jersey. It has a crystal ball for him to go there. He ends up flipping to come play for Shawn Clark in UCF. Probably, in my opinion, and I think I've said this, but some of the additions that Scott Frost and Shawn Clark made on the offensive line were some of the biggest additions they could have made. They lost a lot last season. You kind of went into this year like, what's it going to look like? And Carter Miller was a guy that a lot of people went after, and I'm not going to bury the lead here. I would be shocked if he is not starting left guard or right guard from day one. He obviously made 8 starts at left guard last year. I assume he's going to play left guard this year. But he is a guy that you can truly believe is going to come in and be a starter from day one. And it is a huge, huge pickup for the staff. Because, again, like I said, the recruiting aspect is going to take a year or two to kind of get back to even a similar level that it was with Gus. So to be able to get a couple of 4 stars to come in, one on the offensive line, in that transfer portal, is massive. So good looks by them. Carter Miller, probably a starter. Shaheem Hill, another redshirt junior. He was on the team. I don't see him really having a role. Laparca Langston, again, another guy where the coaching staff goes into the portal and finds a potential gem. 6'8", 310 pounds, high 3-star from Northwest Mississippi Community College. He was the number 1 offensive tackle in the portal. He was the number 1 or number 2, whatever site you look at, offensive tackle. And listen, there's always that, is the game going to be able to convert to Division I, right? Some community college players, they come in and they just can't do what they did, right? It happens all the time. But there's a reason why JUCO players are so highly sought after by so many high-end Power 4 teams. Because most of the time, they do hit. And I think a guy like Laparca Langston has a really good shot to come in and be a starter on that offensive line. He's 6'8". He's got the size. UCF needs a guy with size at that tackle position. They already have Paul Rubelt. They're kind of searching for that next one, and Langston's got a shot to make a name there. Next guy, Preston Cushman. Again, another guy that you get from the portal that has some high upside. 6'6" interior offensive line from Ole Miss, played in 12 games for the Rebels, primarily on special teams. And that's where I think you really have to put a little asterisk. You don't really know how good Preston Cushman is. I do like the size. 6'6" as a guard is huge. I mean, if you're looking at the UCF has a potential to have a really big offensive line. And I talked about in the Big 12, in Power 4 football, you need a big offensive line. Preston Cushman could come in and be really bad. We've seen it. Doesn't matter if you're coming from the SEC, the Big 10, Big 12, ACC, or Pac-12. It doesn't matter. You can come in, play for one of those teams, be a starter, and still be bad. Preston Cushman wasn't even a starter. He was special teams. But I think with his size, and if he can come in spring and get developed and molded as a rotational piece, he's got a shot. And I think it's a good get to bring in. He's got 2 years of eligibility. So even if you don't play him this year, it's a guy that could potentially be in your rotation next year. So we'll see. Justin Royce, 6'5", offensive tackle from Virginia Union. He did go to school in Lakeland. Again, another guy that they clearly they were looking at every point of the offensive line which was needed. And you can't have not a lot of depth. I mean, the more depth you have at that offensive tackle spot and in the guard spots, the better. So I think a guy like Justin Royce, 6'5", I'm intrigued to see what they do with him. But coming from Virginia Union, it's going to be an uphill battle. Because again, when you have a guy like Laparca Langston coming from Northwest Mississippi Community College, high-ranking guy, you're going to have to beat out a guy like him first to continue to move up. And I think Langston is the better overall player. But I am excited to see a guy like Justin Royce come in and see what he can do. Now those are all the juniors. So now we're getting to the seniors and the fifth-year guys. So Ja'Kiah Leftwich, we're playing his former team, North Carolina. He's been on North Carolina, and he's been on Georgia Tech. Last season, he appeared in 9 games in Chapel Hill. He only started 1 of them. He did play in 17 games across 2 seasons for Georgia Tech. He did start 8 of those. So he's got starting experience. Didn't really play a lot for UNC last year, played a good chunk for Georgia Tech. I think this is a guy, again, you need depth at these positions. He's 6'6". He can play the tackle position. UCF, especially over the last couple of years, has had injury issues. So if a guy like Paul Rubel goes down, you can throw in a Ja'Kai Leftwich there, and that is really good depth. That is, if we've learned anything, the Big 12, you need depth at every position. That's Power 4 football. It's not about your starters, it's about your bench. And Scott Frost and the staff have realized that. They know that, especially when you get to the DB position. They have depth among depth upon depth. So this is a good signing. And hey, there's a part of me that kind of wants to see him play against UNC, because why not? But we will see. Keegan Smith, a redshirt senior. He did transfer here last year from Central Michigan. I think he's very interesting because we talked about him last year. He's definitely a guard. He could probably play center if they really wanted him to. He was their starting guard in 2023 at Central Michigan. He's played both guard positions. I think he could play center. It would just be, again, he's never played it in college, not to my understanding, but I think he's a interesting potential dark horse starter. He was sought after last year in 2024 when he entered the portal. He came to UCF, didn't get any playing time, but I think that's a guy that, again, his coaching staff could come in and see some potential there, and he could potentially play. That is a guy. He's been in the city for a year. He's highly sought after, stayed. He is a guy that you could potentially see as a dark horse starter. Now we get to the fifth year guys. Cam Kinney, he's been at UCF for a little bit, originally at Georgia, hasn't really been able to take that step. He's played for UCF. I think he might be able to play this year. I do want to see some new blood in there. I think there's some of the guys that you've seen from the years previous that just haven't proven themselves. I do think Cam Kinney has some good things that he's been able to show. But I guess that's something we're going to be able to see potentially in spring and heading into fall. Paul Rubelt, obviously, I think we all know that is probably the most given starter for UCF. It's the name we all know. He was the starter. He showed some good things. Listen, he needs to be better. I'm assuming he's going to be better. But most of the time, if there was an offensive line breakdown, I wasn't saying, oh, it's Paul Rubel all the time. I think there were other guys where it was more of an issue. And I said before, yes, he does need to get better. There were some issues last year. Let some guys get by him. He needs to improve his technique a hair. But I think whenever you can have a guy that started basically all the games last year, is a huge offensive tackle, and has experience starting and playing in the Big 12, you can't trade that for anything. So imagine not bringing back Paul Rubelt this year and you'd have to replace your entire offensive line. At least this, you have a staple on the offensive line that you can kind of mix and match around him and find the best fit. And then finally, Gerard Melamar. I think it's Melamar. I'm from Washington. I'm going to have to figure out how to say his last name. Cool name. 6'4", from Washington. He's been with the Huskies his entire career. He started 11 games last year as a left guard. If you watch tape on him, I think there's some good things. There's some not good things. I think he's a little under athletic. But when we talked about guys with a ton of maturity, can compete, have a lot of snaps under the belt, starter level snaps, I think that's always important. We talked about that for a couple guys, like Ja'Kai Leftwich. Maybe he hasn't started all the games in his career, but he's started. He started 9 games in his career and played in over 20. So when you get guys like that to come to your program, it can only help. Now, it always doesn't work out. I'm not saying Gerard is going to start, but when you're starting for a Washington team that wasn't awful last year, had a decent season, and didn't look awful. He was a pretty good, decent left guard. I think you bring in a guy like him, and I think Washington wanted to move on. That was kind of everything you read. It was Washington ultimately wanted Gerard to leave. They wanted somebody new. But for this UCF team, I'm not saying no to it. I think you need guys like that, especially to come in and help the depth, like I've said this entire episode. All right. I didn't think I would get through that. I hope you guys enjoyed my spiel on all of them. But let me get to my predictions. These are my predictions for the offensive line in February of 2025 before August. So these can obviously change. I'm going to start from the right tackle position because Paul Rubelt, I would not be shocked if they move him to left tackle. Like, I think there might be a chance, but in my book, he's going to stick at right tackle, keep him with what he knows, which is that right tackle position. And yeah, that's like the bona fide draw him in to a starting role. Right guard. Again, some of these are just my personal thought process. So right guard, Preston Cushman. Like I said, Ole Miss was only played special teams. The likelihood of this happening, I don't know. But I like length. I like size. And a 6'6" right guard for me gets the job done. He's going to have to prove it in spring and fall. But I think the bigger you are, the better this line will be. And I think having a Paul Rubelt next to a Preston Cushman on the right side would be absolutely monumental for UCF. At center, this is another shocker and probably not going to happen. But I'm going Walt Claire Flynn. I think the kid's got so much potential. This is the year to get him playing time. When we talk about play the young kids, he was a true freshman last year, going to be a redshirt freshman this year. I think this is the year to get him some reps, get him playing time. Even if it's in the first couple games, see how he fares, and if he doesn't do well, then you can pull him. But I think starting him early in the year, giving him those opportunities, I think he can make the most of it. I think he's put on some good weight, and I want to see Walt Claire Flynn get on the field for the Knights. At left guard, I'm going Carter Miller. Again, one of the best, if not the best additions to UCF this transfer portal cycle. He was wanted by a lot of people. I think he's 6'4". Let me look that up. I'll just do this live as we go because, again, like I said, I like size. So I think he's 6'4", though. If I'm not mistaken, let me look at 247. Oh, he's 6'2". So he's a little bit. So that could be, ultimately, that could be the negative for him. My hair, I've not even looked at my thing, and my hair's been down this entire time. That's not good. Not redoing it. But Carter Miller, I think, ultimately is going to start. He's too good of a player. But again, making that leap from a school like Louisiana Monroe to UCF could be a jump. I think he's big, so he makes up for his size, just kind of like Walt Claire Flynn. But I think you have to start him at left tackle or left guard just for his sheer ability alone. But we will see. At the end of the day, you put him on the field, you see how they play, and if Carter Miller doesn't perform, you can move in a bunch of other guys that have come here that have a lot of experience and can probably do the job. And then at left tackle, I'm going LaParca Langston. Listen, like, at the end of the day, when you get an opportunity to add a 6'8", 310-pound tackle, that's got a lot to prove. Number one JUCO offensive tackle in the country in the cycle. I think it's a no-brainer. He's got 3 years of eligibility, I believe, with the new community college rules or JUCO rules. So this is a chance and an opportunity for a guy to really make a name for himself and really come in and start from day one for the Knights. And I think it's absolutely monumental and huge that you can have two big-time offensive tackles on the left and right side, a potential big right guard, and two big-bodied center and left guards. The offensive line gets me excited. It gets me really excited to potentially see what Shawn Clark can do with this roster, with this unit, with this line, and how he can develop these guys. At the end of the day, we can go into August, September, the line stinks, and we're like, wow, this is really bad. But I think the guys, I've not been more excited about an offensive line in the last couple of years. I think they've added some really good pieces that can really make an impact from day one. If you made it all 30 minutes hearing me talk about offensive linemen, you're a real one. But if you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment, share, do all that you do. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Let's see. Next Tuesday, don't have anything. Well, we've got some planned because we're going to post one of these. I'm thinking maybe Edge. I'm thinking we maybe talk about the Edge guys. I'm hoping we're supposed to talk to Scott Frost soon. I don't know when. They haven't told us a date, but we're supposed to talk to Scott Frost soon about all the staff, all the new players. So when that happens, we'll be dropping a pod about what he says and all that good stuff. But until then, we're going to keep these breakdowns rolling, and I hope you're enjoying them. I know they're not as enticing as some normal content, but it kind of gets you a little bit more juice and a little bit more motivated with the season still far away. Gives you a little bit to learn about some of these guys that maybe you just don't know yet, but you will learn over the next couple months. All right, everybody, this has been Charge On presented by Bet Online. We will see you on Tuesday.